Right, people, we'll open this meeting as the ordinary meeting of the Council. If we could start with that karakia.
Taruwha. Ki tōku mana tana tatia naru. Ki runga, ki tēnā o tātou. Ki mahi atua, ki hikihi, ki e toi tutupu, toi tāna, toi taraka, toi te maru. Ki e tutu, ka whakamawa, ki e tina, ure, tae.
Thank you. Any conflict of interest? No conflict of interest, no apologies, no public forum, no late items. Confirmation of the council minutes on the 14th of May. Somebody prepared to move their true and correct record. Councillor Johnson, seconded. Councillor Bowyer. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No committee reports. We go straight into page 15. Local board have done well. Deliberations report. And we start with Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Josie to take us through the first part of the report around the consultation feedback, and then I'll pick up the advice from there.
Thank you, Josie.
Kia ora, and good afternoon, Council. As Karen said, I'm here to present the deliberations report for Local Water Done Well. The purpose of this report is to present you with a summary of the feedback received through the consultation, and as Karen said, the report also includes staff advice on how to respond to this feedback, and when we get to that point I'll hand it over to Karen. So consultation ran for 1 month between 21st of March to the 22nd of April, and during this time we received 139 submissions. The majority of these submissions were received online, and 10 of these submitters took the opportunity last week here in this room to be heard and to present their views. Our submitters were predominantly Masterton urban residents, predominantly over 60 years of age and identifying as New Zealand European. There is more information in the appendix about our submitters, including some charts for those people like me who like to see charts, so they're there for you as well. The community were presented with 2 options. The first option was our proposal, which was to join with South Wairarapa, Masterton and Tarawera to form a joint CCO to deliver our water services in the future. The second option, our alternative option, was a Masterton-only option, an enhanced status quo option. When presented with the 2 options, about 60% of our submitters indicated their preference for the proposal, so that's the Y+T option, and about 40% for the Masterton-only or the enhanced status quo. In addition, submitters were also asked to identify why they picked the reasons, so this was an opportunity to really express their views. And nearly all, 91% of the submitters, took the opportunity to share more information. All of these responses were then considered in context of which option they picked, whether it be the proposal or the alternative option, and then we identified some key themes from all of these comments. So support for the proposal was largely driven by its perceived benefits, particularly around potential cost savings from the economies of scale, but also long-term benefits and the ability to increase borrowing. And while many of the reasons did state benefits of the proposed option, there were also some concerns. These were predominantly related to uncertainty, so questions that still would need to be made, particularly around governance, structure and pricing. Among those who prefer the Masterton-only option, the most common reasons related to concerns around the proposed option around Wairarapa+T, particularly around pricing standardisation. Now, last week we had our hearings, and some of the submitters there also indicated some levels of fluidity around what their options was, depending on what conditions were met. That's a summary of all of the findings, so I'll pause there and hand over to Karen to share a little bit more.
Thank you, Josie. So, on the basis of the feedback that's been provided, the rest of the report goes into 2 specific areas. First, responding to specific themes and matters raised by the community that officers thought was really important to bring to your attention, so that you have those in your mind as you continue on and go through our deliberations today. Officers also provide, in response to elected members' requests, If a decision was made to progress with the Wairarapa Tararua model, what might that look like? What are the timeframes and what would be required there? So we set those out in the report. So I'll just go firstly through to some of the advice that we provided in response to feedback. I think it's really important just to go through these points so that we're all clear, and then you can ask questions on them. So the first part was, will the local water done well models lead to privatisation? The answer is no. In the legislation that's been provided, there are specific restrictions against privatisation. There was some feedback that this might be a first stage, but there's nothing signalled within the legislation to actually respond to that. Will the Masterton only model be the same as existing service provision? I think it was really important for us to highlight, particularly when there is a lot of uncertainty, there are concerns around progressing, and there were submitters that were saying, rather stick with the status quo and what we know, rather than progress in an uncertain world. And we just wanted to be really clear for elected members and for the public that the status quo isn't an option. The enhanced status quo, so the same delivery model, Masterton only, is that second option, but that will need to operate in a very different way, in a very different regulatory and environmental settings. So things will be different. It's not exactly what we're doing now, and I've highlighted in the advice there what the differences are, so just really important to reiterate that. Another question was around, is there an opportunity to join or withdraw from a regional model later? We don't have that information at the moment in front of us, but there's nothing to prevent, and indeed I think that any regional model, whether it's a Wairarapa Tararua model or... Is that better? There we go. Whether it's the Wairarapa Tararua or any other model, there may be restrictions set by the participating councils in that regional model for people who are joining, that they must stay within a certain number of years, and that nobody else can join within a certain number of years. And that's really around protecting the investment that goes in at that early stage. There's nothing to say that there has to be those restrictions, but it's likely that participating councils would put some of those protections against it. A question around rates. So if water comes out of rates, does that mean that the rates bill goes down by the same amount as what the water bill will go up? And we know that that's not going to happen. The water bill will more than likely go up more, because the whole point of the reforms is around making sure we've got the right infrastructure, which means it's going to probably cost more money. So that's something to be set further down the track by a new water organisation, whether that's us or whether that's a regional grouping. But we know that there's overheads that need to be accounted for. We don't know at this stage, because we haven't done that work so far, on what that looks like, but it's unlikely that there will be the same drop as the increase. Can we have confidence in the financial modelling? There were some specific questions there around, it was very complicated. It was complicated for all of us to understand, around what did all the finances mean, and do we have confidence moving forward? And we did, as you'll recall, we had that financial model peer reviewed by a couple of organisations, and moving forward we will have to meet the DIA requirements around sustainability, and the information, the reporting that we'll have to provide will make sure that we have confidence in the way that we're calculating those finances, the actual modelling moving forward. So yes, we can have confidence in that. And some more feedback was around because of that lack of certainty about the future, for example, what a joined up CCO would look like, what the board would look like, who would be on it, what would the shareholding, what would the decision making look like. There is a lot of uncertainty, and so sometimes there was comments around better that we stick with the status quo rather than moving forward. Well, I've already addressed there is no status quo. It will be a new even if it is a Masterton only model, that will be a new looking model, and different provisions for the different settings we'll be operating in. A lot of that uncertainty does also apply to a Masterton CCO. We don't know what the regulatory settings, we've got an idea of what powers there will be, but we don't know exactly what the settings are because the information's not out yet. So we don't know what we're going to have to meet in terms of those environmental standards, the economic standards and the economic regulation. So there's uncertainty across the whole of the modelling, and that's just unfortunately inherent in the process. The government's timelines mean that we've had to consult at this stage. Ordinarily, we would wait till we've got all the information of what everything looks like, but we're just not able to do that. We're required under the legislation to consult now. As Josie mentioned, some of the key themes that came out: price standardisation, price harmonisation, whatever we want to call it. There were concerns for people who supported the Wairarapa model and people who supported the Masterton only model around standardisation. So, is it required? It's not required. We were clear in the consultation document about what actually it means when you're standardising your prices. And the DIA have put out some guidance around price standardisation, and actually if you look to standardise your prices earlier on in a process, if you go ahead with a CCO, that actually does result in cross-subsidisation, which could be unfair for those authorities that would ordinarily be on the lower price.
So could you just say that last bit again? I missed it. Just the last 3 sentences.
It's explicit in the guidance. If you look in there, they do actually say that it could be unfair if in the earlier terms that you're looking at cross-subsidisation could be an unfairness. If it's not reflected in the cost that's actually being charged, pricing and cost go together, and we'll come back to that a little bit more, Councillor. So yes, so that's mentioned in the DIA guidance there. So they're looking at timeframes around standardisation and what you want to do and what you not want to do there. And the DIA provides some worked examples, and they look over a 10-year span how not subsidising over a 10-year span might look like, but there's no requirement to subsidise and there's no time limit set against that. So the question is, can Council protect Masterton ratepayers from price standardisation, given that, if there is the mood of actually reflecting your costs, what can you do to ensure that standardisation is not a feature moving forward? So we've outlined in the report there that there's a number of different, what we call foundation documents, and that would be setting up a CCO. There's a number of different places within those foundation documents where we have to look at finances, revenue, and therefore pricing. And it's within these places, within these foundation documents, that we could look at if there were some clauses or some protections against price standardisation where they would sit. And so in the Constitution, in the transfer agreement, and in a statement of expectations, these are all provisions where you can put these standard clauses and all agree to what's going to go into those foundation documents. There is also some guidance that's going up on the DIA website. If it's not up there already, it's going to be up there quite shortly, around price differentiation protections. So lots of councils are grappling with this issue at the moment, and so the DIA have commissioned some legal advice and some examples of where you can put those protections and the exact wording of those, so that everybody knows what we're talking about and where to build those in if that's what is desired. So that's where we can put protections in. We also commissioned Morris & Lowe to provide some further advice around not just where, but how, and how Council, if it chose to go ahead with a Wairarapa CCO, how it can embed excuse me, those protections that would protect Masterton's relative position. And they've got included with this report is their advice, and it's very clear within that advice that the ability to have particular protections does enable us to move forward with negotiations around what we think those foundation principles might be, for example around non-standardisation, decision making, so what sort of voting rights we would have given that Masterton would come to the table with a greater number of connections, with more revenue, and so we need to protect that relative position moving forward in our negotiations with the other councils, and that advice covers how we can do that through that shareholding and through the voting, through decision making. The biggest question I think when we come to standardisation is, can future non-standardisation prices be guaranteed? The simple answer is no, we can't protect. Moving into the future, against all potential changes. Parliamentary sovereignty says you can't bind future parliaments. So as with any legislation, a new government could get in, this government could say, actually, we want to change the legislation settings, and it could change them. So at the moment, there's no requirement that we have price standardisation. That could change in the future.
Well, there are questions at the end, Brent.
Oh, I just thought there's one word missing, I thought.
Well, you can bring that up when I've finished. Thank you. A new council, a new Masterton council may decide that actually we've got the benefits of joining with the CCO and the prices aren't that dissimilar, and actually there's more benefit with standardising pricing. That's something that a future council could do, and we wouldn't want to restrict a future council from making those decisions. The Morrison Low advice is very clear that actually what you need to do is make sure that you've got sufficient protection but without stymieing the operation, so that the operation of a CCO is no longer efficient because it's been controlled too much in its foundation settings. Another point that has been raised is intervention by the Commerce Commission. Can the Commerce Commission intervene in the CCO's pricing decisions? So the Commerce Commission is the new economic regulator. Their powers are set out in Bill 3. Of course, Bill 3 is still a bill and it's not an act, so that's another area of uncertainty that we have moving forward. At the moment, the specific focus for the Commerce Commission is around making sure that a new water organisation provides sufficient information, excuse me, that people can understand what they're being charged and where those costs are coming from. So that's their primary focus. There is an ability within the legislation for new powers to come along, and those new powers are outlined in that they could be things like price quality provisions, which is like setting maximum and minimum thresholds for pricing, for revenue, to make sure that the reforms are realised in that there's sufficient investment in infrastructure moving forward, and that the organisation is an efficient organisation. Now, efficiency in an economic world looks mostly around costs, and that your price reflects your costs. Information, we had a workshop here, and we had some further information supplied to us by the Commerce Commission around if there was a disparity in pricing within the CCO, would that be a matter for the Commerce Commission? And they said they would need to have a look at that and why there was pricing disparity. If pricing reflected costs, that may not mean that there's inefficiencies within that system, but they wouldn't know, so they'd have to have a look. There may be some powers that come further down the track, we don't know what they are, that may enable them to intervene more with pricing. But at the moment, their focus is going to be on looking and making sure that we have sufficient transparency around that, and making sure that there's efficiencies in terms of pricing reflecting costs. So that's the advice to respond to those matters that were raised. The next part of the report is around progressing a Wairarapa Plus Tararua model, what that might look like. We set out a time frame there. This is a very, very tight time frame. As you know, we do have to submit a service delivery plan, water services delivery plan, on the 3rd of September. What we've built into that process is effectively, if there was a decision today to move ahead with Wairarapa Tararua, what would it look like? It would mean that we would sign a commitment agreement with the other participating councils. We would have a workshop with yourselves to look at what those foundation principles were. So if there was a mood to not standardise prices for a period of time, or if prices were in a certain percentage point of each other, these were what we call our foundation principles that we would carry forward through our negotiations, so that we would build those in. The intent would be to build those into those foundation documents that we talked about earlier, the Statement of Expectations, the Constitution. So we would negotiate with the other councils around that, and then we would come back to council. We may have to do it as an iterative process, there may be 2 or 3 of those. We would get to the point where we'd come back to council for a decision. If council decided at that point that what you wanted to go into your foundation principles was not looking like it was an outcome of negotiations, there would be an off-ramp there. And what that off-ramp would mean would that we would then only proceed with a Masterton only model, with the proposal to only submit a Masterton only plan to the DIA in September. If the decision was at that point, yes, it's looking okay, we want some finer points, but we want you to go ahead and carry out and draft a water services delivery plan for Wairarapa Tararua. We would go away, continue that work. That plan would need to be agreed by council. If you didn't have everything that you wanted in that plan, that's another off-ramp. There's not very much time at that point for us to finalise the Masterton only Wairarapa service, that's the water services delivery plan, so that's a lot of work for MAS to do. But we'll be running those two things in parallel to make sure that, you know, on that last off-ramp we still would be able to get that plan in to DIA in time. So proposals are to have 2 off-ramps moving forward. So that is a way of moving forward. The decision that you have for you to decide today, after reflecting on what the submissions have told you, what were the key points, the advice that we provided to you, the decision for you today is whether you want us to proceed with that negotiation with the other participating councils of Wairarapa Tararua. You can get more information through that process. That might then resolve some of those uncertainties that you have, help bring you to a negotiating position with the other councils so that you get everything that you want in a CCO. Or the other decision is that you don't want to progress with that for whatever reasons that you would want to talk about, and so it's really clear to the community on why you're making your decision, and then we will just proceed with the Masterton only. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, questions for Karen? Any questions? Councillor Goodwin.
Just,
You stand up, Rick.
Yep. I'll find it later on, maybe someone else.
Councillor Lennox.
Just on page 26, under the 24-25 progress in a Wairarapa team model, page 26, it just talks about no government representation is proposed around that project group. Will this be the same for the other 3 councils that are looking at joining, say, if they decide to proceed? Will they also have no governance representation in that group?
I don't know the answer to that. We have been, obviously we had the governance group that was looking to bring everything together for the consultation document, and so that was really key to make sure that we all had the strategic direction, I guess, about what we were going to put out in the consultation document. So it was really important that we had a joined up thinking on that. We're now in the position of negotiating. Some are maybe of the view that actually that's for a council only decision to make, so it's better if we don't proceed with governance and have a joined up model and a joined up body to give that governance. And when we had a discussion with you at the workshop, there was feeling that anything needed to come back to the full council, and so that was why we were proposing that there wasn't any governance body, I guess, to go forward through the negotiations, that we wanted to come back to the council for direction. But I see the Chief Executive's got his hand up.
I think Councillor Lennox might be talking about item 1 there, which is in the negotiating team, not having a councillor on the negotiating team.
Yes.
So, and I think with that there, we were looking at having myself, our General Manager of Assets, David here also is Director Commercial, and then potentially bringing in somebody like a Dan Bonifant or someone like that who can come into those negotiations. But it was more about us being able to report back. But if you feel that you'd like to have an elected member on there or the mayor on there, it's something that can be discussed.
Can I ask one more question?
It's just on there though.
Pardon?
On the first page it said it would be you two
That's no signing the agreement.
signing the agreement.
Yeah, that's not the part of the project group. So my question is, say we was pursued, with the recommendation, my concern would be is that other councils' project groups would have elected members or mayors being part of those groups, and we all know that some of those characters are quite strong-willed, strong-minded, etc. So I would be worried that if other councillors had that, I guess, an advantage on us around the project groups, that would just concern me a little bit. I feel like we should look to consider having someone from council.
Sorry, my response was probably a little bit ham-fisted in that we had an oversight group, a directions group. So the choice is, do we have another one of those? Because I think a project group needs to be officers and experts that can move those negotiations on. We could have another oversight group with governors on. That's something that we could explore. Maz, have you got any further update on that?
So we decided collectively that the AOG had reached the end of its term, the terms of reference had expired.
Yeah.
This team is all about trying to get as fast as we can to what we think might be some reasonable bottom lines, and then we bring it back to you all. Like as Karen was saying, you all kind of wanted to weigh in on what those bottom lines might be. So it's not that we would do any settling, it's just we would start doing the hard chat, I guess, around, you know, what might be best for Masterton, bring that back to you all. If you give it the nod, whatever, then we start the negotiations, and that will be iterative.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy with that. I was just more querying to have an indication of what the other councils were going to do.
I think it's quite important that for us we need to keep an ear on the ground and understand what they're doing, but we also need to kind of keep our powder dry and remember that it's a little bit different now. Now we've got to think about what's best for Masterton as everyone else is thinking about what's best for their communities. So a little bit of separation, I think. Healthy tension.
Councillor Bowyer, then Councillor Tooter.
Thank you for the report. Just through all this, has there been much work done on how the possibility, if this goes through, how debts and assets are to be treated in coming? Because in the Townsend report it talked about a win-win-win-win situation. Has that been a lot more fleshing out in that, or what's been going on with that?
We've done a little bit of work there, but that is a good example of something that we would put on the table that we would bring back to you in terms of what options you might want us to explore around shareholding, transfer of debts, and how that equates to shareholding, voting rights, etc. So we've done a little bit of, David's done a bit of work in the back room.
Councillor Tooter.
Thank you for the report. I actually agree with Councillor Lennox. I feel that a councillor needs to be on the negotiating team because we're the people who the public will come to. They asked through the submissions, there were certain things that they would want to be included in the negotiations, and at least we know, firsthand, we're one step away from being able to answer them. So that's just my view.
Thank you, Councillor Tooter. Councillor Goodwin.
Just a few queries. On page 24, Karen's report, you said while protections against price standardisation can be put in place, standardisation in the future cannot be guaranteed. Do you mean, did you omit the word against at the end of that, which is what I think most councillors are worried about, is about standardisation being imposed. And we've heard that we can put protections against price standardisation, but they are subject to external central government change and can't be guaranteed. And so that final statement, standardisation in the future cannot be guaranteed. I just think it needs another word.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, I was using standardisation in terms of the whole verb about whether you're standardising or you're not standardising, but to be very clear, yes, we would be guaranteeing non-standardisation is obviously where the concern is that we do not want to standardise prices, and so the protections will be to not standardise.
I mean, in fact, what you mean is I think that there are no guarantees.
There are no guarantees.
About standardisation or non-standardisation.
That's exactly right.
In the future, and that's very important. Now, just one other issue I'd like to raise, about elected members being on that body. I must admit I agree with one of the submissions that the process under the AOG was, I wasn't very happy with it, and I know I'm not the only one. So that sort of put me on. The question is, who would you put on? And, that I see as a major problem, because we had a couple of reps on the AOG and didn't really, in my view, pan out very well when you look at the fuss we made over the MCA, and here we are 9 months later and hardly any of those important points got mentioned. But so I'm just saying that I'm not overly fussed about having an elected member on there. If our instructions are crystal clear in writing, I don't see the problem with someone carrying it out. It's got to come back to us to sign off, so to me we retain control. And the final point I wanted to make was the Russell McVeigh letter. That was very interesting, but the most interesting thing to me was the last 2 sentences in the letter, which were actually out of the box, and a lot of people wouldn't have bothered reading. Please note that this note does not constitute legal advice. If unsure as to their position on any matter, Council should consider obtaining their own independent legal advice. And to me, this is a very complex thing. In anything, even something as simple as buying a house, I use a solicitor. If I was buying into a business and statutory things, I believe, and I know I've spoken to a few other councillors, that we need to, I think there's enough questions for us to ask someone like Simpson Grierson for a legal opinion on specifically our case. That's all.
And just to respond to that, we will be taking expert advice and professional advice as we need it, as progressing forward, yes. So whether that's legal advice or financial advice.
Excellent.
Councillor Johnson.
With regards to negotiating, I agree with Brent on this one. I'm relaxed about not having someone from an elected member there. Having been involved in property negotiations over a number of years, worst thing you can do is get the vendor in the room. But I was very encouraged to hear that it's possible we could get someone like Dan. So that's on the cards. Is it a conversation that you may have had in anticipation already?
Kim has already given this consideration, and there's maybe 1 or 2 externals that we could bring in to represent us in the negotiations.
Yeah, I feel really comfortable with that, and also too, as Councillor Goodwin said, I'm sure that if we do progress this, that the line in the sand will be pretty clear. So I would have every confidence in that process.
Any further questions for Karen? Councillor Helena.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Karen. Just a couple of questions, and they're not all connected, sorry. So, just the recommendation. Can I ask, is that a formal motion? Today's recommendation?
Only when it's put.
Only when
It needs to be put as a
So
recommendation.
if it is put, then to argue against the motion, we'd need to put a counter motion on the table, or we'd have to deal with that one first and then raise a counter motion.
We'd have to put that recommendation first, wouldn't we, Harriet? And then signal an amendment.
There are 2 options in the recommendation.
Yeah. So it's an either or. If you wanted an amendment, you'd need to
So
identify
make an
them
amendment,
first.
but if the amendment from the last couple of weeks, where you've said the amendment is going counter to the motion,
Yes.
then you need to put up another motion after that motion has been put. Is that the process?
So, sorry, I've confused two matters there. So this first, so the recommendation is an either or. So I would recommend that the Mayor chose one to put forward and you're voting on that one, because otherwise if that fails then it's the other. The discussion that we had previously was if the motion's already been put, you can't then put an amendment that would basically be the opposite of that. It has to be, you're not amending it, you're actually saying, I don't want to proceed with that.
So
But we've got an either or here, and so my suggestion would be you have your discussion, and then the Mayor can put that, whether it's an either, and indicate through voting which one it would be.
Yeah, I don't get that. Well, I sort of get that, but so an amendment has to be put before the motion is put.
No, you need to put a motion and then you want to amend that motion, so you'd have that discussion around the amendment and voting around that amendment first.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my second question is, and maybe I was the only one in the room 2 weeks ago when we talked about the process from that point on. And my understanding from the room, and again, sometimes I read the room wrong, or hear the room wrong, we were going to come to our foundation principles first, then seek legal advice around that, then find out from our potential entity partners if that was acceptable, and then we were going to come and have a vote. And that's been 180 in my view, and I'm sort of wondering why that's happened.
So in order to progress, we need direction to progress. So that's why we've worded the recommendation as it is, that it is a progression. It's not a decision that it's Y+T. It's a direction to move ahead with negotiating, understanding that there are two off-ramps, so that decision of actually we want to stop now and we just want to have a Masterton only, you've got two more opportunities to do that. So that's why we've worded it the way it is.
But we're going to be making an initial decision today to potentially go with the Y+T model before we've agreed to some foundation principles and before we've had that checked legally what we're looking for. And yes, I get there's off-ramps, but why would we do it that way? Would any other business contract be done that way? Buying a house, would I do it that way? About to get married, would I do it that way? No, I'd do my due diligence first. And I thought that's what we agreed to, and I'm wondering now why that's been flipped on its head.
Because we don't have anything to do due diligence on until we start that negotiating.
But
You
we're
don't
going to
usually, when
start
you're getting
that.
married,
We're going
you
to
don't-
start that before we sign the paper.
But we're not signing anything here. We're just saying
We're
move
agreeing
ahead.
for something.
Move
Agreeing
ahead.
to-
That's
we're
all.
officially agreeing
Yeah.
to something.
So that
Formal motion.
Yes.
I think that's
The
what most of us
recommendation-
understood, Tom, you're saying. I mean, I certainly understood it. Did anybody else have a problem?
Yeah. Well,
Only two.
the problem came, in my memory, was between you and Matt, when Matt asked if we were deciding, and he's not in the room to corroborate, Matt asked if we were deciding to explore the W+T motion. You read the room quite correctly and said the opposite of what your motion says here. It is a wee bit disturbing in that you had a stroke of brilliance 2 weeks ago and now you've faded back into I don't know what.
Well, we have a chance to reflect when we've got new information and when we've done more work, and we're always open to changing our minds. That's what makes us good decision makers and good governance. So based on that, when I'm drafting the report, I'm thinking, we haven't got anything to say, go ahead and start negotiating. We need to have that direction. When we're going through the negotiating period, we can gather more information, we can seek our legal advice, we can work with you on what those foundation principles are, and then we can carry on the negotiation. There's no
one's denying
decisions.
You need information to negotiate.
That's right.
We're just saying,
Yep.
let's decide on what that information is and start some negotiation, but let's not officially move in a particular direction until we've understood what the ground is that we're standing on. And there's two things there, the legal advice, and secondly, whether or not our potential partners will be accepting of that. Because if they're not, then why sign this initial agreement or sign to get on board with something that we might not? And we haven't, in my view, we haven't done sufficient groundwork, and this is probably the most important issue, significant issue and long-lasting issue that our ratepayers are going to face, certainly from the decision we make as councillors this term. And I think I don't want to say this is the case, but I think as soon as we take this first step, we're sort of locked in a little bit to one particular pathway. And if you're genuine about doing what's best for the community, or if we're genuine about doing what's best for the community, I believe we should do it the other way around. And I'm wondering why that was flip-flopped, or was I wrong in what I understood to be what we'd agreed to 2 weeks ago?
Well, I think
Anyway, I suppose we're not going to solve this right now, but I have a couple of other questions on the consultation. Can I ask, well, I'm going to ask, of the 60% that supported the Y+T model, how significant, do we know how significant price was proportionate for that group?
Josie, did you want to come up?
So there was a little bit more information in the report about that because it was a really important point. I think there was about a handful, I think 8 people, when we asked them what was your reason for picking your reason. So 8 people that picked the proposed option, the Y+T, mentioned standardisation in their response. Of the 8, half of the people indicated that their choice was conditional on no standardisation, so that's about 4.
And so those that chose the model, do we think they were choosing for other reasons than the lowest price?
Well, it's hard to say, to know exactly what they were thinking at the time.
Yeah.
Some of the 8 people that talked about price standardisation listed off benefits and then also mentioned the price standardisation.
Because did we make it clear in the consultation document that although we have a graph on page 28 or whatever page it was, 4 price lines, and the 2 that were of significance was the non-standardised price line, which was the lowest, and then the standardised price line. And there was a significant difference, and then there was the price line of the standalone, which was in between those 2 lines. Would it be reasonable to assume that people were thinking with the Y+T model it'll be the non-standardised price that we'll be going for?
Yeah.
We don't
know that.
No, we don't know that. So my next question is, and this was raised prior to the consultation document, why are we not informing the community that those 2 prices are uncertain, we don't know what they're going to be? And so I'm wondering if we've got people responding to that positive to the Y+T entity, just assuming that the lowest price will be the price. It's possible, isn't it?
What we were clear in the consultation document about what those figures represented in the FAQs, and that they were not the prices that were going to be charged.
That's right, but we weren't clear around the elephant in the room that we can't guarantee non-standardisation prices.
We did
I
have
think
some,
we were clear.
Yeah, we did have quite some commentary around standardisation and
Yeah, but it wasn't. We go back and look at the document,
Also
but I
in
remember
the
arguing
engagement.
this case prior to that document going out, because what you do include or don't include, or what you don't emphasise, influences how people respond.
Councillor, you saw the consultation pack.
I did see that,
So-
and I was critical of it,
Okay,
like I have been of the long-term plan, 2 annual plans, and the town hall consultation.
Well, in our view, we were pretty clear. We were also pretty clear in all the engagement evenings when we were questioned around that, and
I
when
agree with
David
you on
put
that.
up
But I'm
the.
talking about those that have just filled it out on their own.
Yeah.
My next question is, and you're dead right, Karen, when I read the feedback, lots of stuff around uncertainty, people's responses, uncertainty around the Y+T, uncertainty around Masterton alone. Was there uncertainty in the Masterton alone around levels of control? did that feature?
Sorry, Josie, she just sat down again.
Level of decision-making control.
I mean,
Was that
the
an
level
issue
of control was the
Was that an issue for the standalone model?
Yeah, so across both options, sorry. So regardless of which option they picked, a lot of our submitters did talk about uncertainty, and that wasn't just about Y plus T, it was across the board.
Yeah, but was there any explicit uncertainty around decision-making control? There was with the Y plus T entity, right? Was there with the standalone?
I'm trying very hard to think now and memorise every single submission. I don't recall, but I can't say
Thank you.
guaranteed either way, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Helena. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. Just around the commitment agreement, will that be dated to the July off-ramp date, or a clause or some wording in there saying that obviously if, I guess just following on from what Tom was saying about committing to something today, say we do, will that have a end date being when we next make our big decision, the next big decision opportunity that we have?
Yes, I think we will be quite clear around the decision points that we'll be looking for from Masterton.
Councillor Goodwin.
Yes, yeah, look, I just made some notes of the submission.
Got a question, Councillor Goodwin?
Yeah, I'll come to it at the end. And yeah, I'll give you the question at the end. Submission 1, Bob Alsop, was worried about standardisation. Submission 3, didn't want to subsidise South Wairarapa District Council. Submission 5, assumed year 10 was less cost.
Are these all the vocal
for
ones?
Masterton. Submission 21, 24, 25, 27, 28, 34, 35, 36, 42, 44 and 82, some of which for W plus T, most of which for standalone, all specified no standardisation acceptable. So you seem to be struggling with that. I'm just pointing out that there was actually quite a few of them very explicit. I could go over the page, but I don't want to overstay my welcome. So did you miss the fact that price standardisation was such an emphatic point, the subsidisation issue with standalone?
I think Josie's comment to the last was in response to a question around uncertainty of control for Masterton and not around subsidisation. We've been very clear in our report the number of those that you've just read out was at the 11 that were concerned about that, and were from both sides. So yes, that was very clear in the report.
Your report, did it say 11 or was it 8?
There was 11 for those for Wairarapa and Tararua, and then another.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I obviously counted more than 11, but whatever, it was the driving thing in both cases from my interpretation of the submissions. There were many submissions that, in my humble opinion, didn't really understand
Got a
what was
question,
going
Councillor
on.
Goodwin?
And you haven't commented.
Councillor Goodwin, have you got a question?
Just putting it.
Have you got a question?
Yeah, it's just putting
Questions
it.
can be long, Gary.
11 and 22.
Yes, so there was 11 and 22 on page 19
Yes.
around standardisation.
Yes, I wonder if why you haven't commented on the number where it was blatantly clear that they didn't understand the documents, which sometimes happens. People, some people go off half-cocked as we don't.
A very complicated and complex matter, we've acknowledged, yes, and it is quite common for people to feedback on that, but we were providing the consultation responses specifically to the consultation itself.
Yes, but I'm just questioning why you didn't comment on what I thought was quite a significant number who clearly didn't understand the document, in my...
Noted.
Thank you, Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Johnson.
Hi, some of the submitters didn't understand that there would be a cost associated with the establishment of a standalone enhanced model for Masterton. They seem to think it was business as usual, which we know that it's not going to be business as usual. So I just wondered if you could clarify the difference in the perceived, because we don't know exactly, but the perceived establishment costs if we were part of Y&T and if we just was a standalone enhanced master model.
I'm just trying to recall what those numbers were. I think it was about $1 million from memory for standalone.
And then it's a shared cost if we went Y&T, which would be...
Yeah, the budget at this point for the Wairarapa Tararoa was $5 million to be shared across the 4 shareholding councils. I can't remember the exact number for Masterton, but it was a reasonable amount of money and a cost that we have to carry ourselves.
Yeah, because I think that was definitely one of the misconceptions in the submitter feedback. They kind of think collaborating is going to cost us, but that it wasn't going to cost anything to set up the Masterton one. So I just wanted to bring that out in the open. Thank you.
Councillor Ellings.
Thank you. Just around, there was a lot of concern around the debt level, that 500% if we were to join with Y+T. So I guess my question around there is there more flexibility to bring that down as a group during negotiations, or is that set by government and that's set in stone?
So that's basically a principle around the new legislation which says you can borrow through the local government funding agency up to 500% if needed, but you wouldn't borrow that to that maximum unless you absolutely needed to, so it just gives you more headroom.
Cool, because I think a lot of the community see that as, we're going to join forces and borrow 500%, so I think that's important that people understand that's not actually right. Thank you.
Karen, while we're talking about the submissions, I read a lot of submissions too, which were the Master standalone, but which said that if the subsidisation thing was sussed out, they would have looked at the Wairarapa Tararoa a lot more favourably. So that happened in this process as well, didn't it?
Yes, that's correct. So that happened on both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
So also some people that picked Masterton only said that if there's no price standardisation, they could change their choice.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Goodwin.
I just wonder if the recommendation on page 15, number 3, would it be sufficient in line with what we agreed to, or where we left this 2 weeks ago, but you say you've had new information. Can't we just agree to progress work on the W+T water services delivery model? Stop. And when we've done that work, then make a decision about going into further negotiations. But I'm agreeing with Councillor Helena really, and get the legal opinion about independent legal opinion, do some more work, and just develop those things that we're interested in. Talk amongst ourselves about what bottom lines we have. There's probably other things other than price standardisation, but I don't know. Can't the resolution give council officers sufficient headroom if we just say to progress work on the W+T model?
So it's a question about what that work would look like. The reason why I wrote it like that is that unless we're indicating that we're moving ahead and that we would want to join a commitment agreement to move ahead, that commitment agreement covers that period of negotiation, we're not going to get any more information because the other councils will not provide information to us to enable us to sit down and take that work forward any more than the information that we've got now. So it doesn't progress our position. It's not a very good negotiating position to say, give me all of your information, but I'm not agreeing to do anything
What sort
with
of
joining with you.
information- Sorry, what sort of information are you talking about? Whereas I suppose, thinking about, independent legal advice, that sort of thing.
What would you be seeking legal advice on at this point, Councillor?
I suppose I would be, if I was sitting in front of a lawyer signing up for this deal, I want to know some sort of indication of certainty, and where, if it's fairly certain, or high risk, or whatever, because there are so many uncertainties. Personally, I think we have to be balancing how much is too much risk for our residents and how much isn't. And so, for instance, that legal opinion, which we haven't had yet, we've had no legal advice on this, external legal advice, which many members have said they would like. To me, it would be just a good thing to go through a few of these things, the Russell McVeigh letter, the Dan amendment to the agenda, go through and ask their opinion on it.
We commissioned that advice. We've got that advice. There's no legal question, in my view, at this point for us to ask a lawyer, other than what we've already got. We've got these standard clauses around protecting around...
Ask that advice, because,
No,
we're the ones that have to make the decision.
You've got this advice, Councillor.
All right.
There's nothing more than we have at the moment. The purpose of moving forward through negotiation is that we can get information from the other participating councils around what their negotiating position is, and then we can form a view around what those principles are, and then we can come back to the council with those at a workshop around this is their potential position. Are we willing to concede particular points, whatever they may be? And at that point, maybe that's when we get our legal advice to say, is this sufficient? Is this a good position commercially to be in? But until we move forward to get that information, there's nothing further we can ask at this moment that will take us any further forward.
Okay, I'm still wondering, what sort of information would you envisage we would be seeking from the other parties?
We're negotiating.
What their negotiating position is, what their principles are.
We need to have a mandate to actually start discussing some negotiation points with them, and they may be our future partners also. So, it might be helpful to look at this through a goodwill lens. There are other organisations which are dependent on the outcome of this discussion.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand why you wouldn't work out, or why we wouldn't collectively work out what our bottom lines are. We talked a lot about price standardisation, which is fine. Very little about anything else.
I think we're probably saying the same thing. The commitment agreement allows us to say to our potential partners, right, we're in the boat for now. We've got things we need to work out. You go and work yours out. We'll work ours out. That's what it enables us to do.
Any further questions? Councillor Lena.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just on the costs side of things, is the and Kim, it's probably a question for you. If we go with the YT model, is it still pretty accurate that we'll be facing $1.7 million of stranded assets?
At this stage, yes. However, we have got a couple of, options that we can put forward to councillors about reducing some levels of service potentially. Whether we look at not filling particular roles. So at this stage, we're holding off on some vacancies too until we see where we head with this. So it certainly wouldn't be 1.7. That's the worst case scenario. My view is that we would present through to the council at least $500,000 or more of efficiencies that we could put on the table for decision.
And disenabling those stranded assets, easy job or complex?
No, well, an example could be that we have a portion of time spent to HR, the HR area, but we only have one HR manager or staff member. some within finance. So it's a matter of probably looking at a haircut across the board a little bit rather than just removing some aspects. So it's about where we can be more efficient, I think, to find those savings, Councillor.
Councillor Johnson.
Just on that, if we progressed to the Masterton standalone, would there be any stranded overheads?
There will be more costs in regards to them financing or having, I suppose, more people within a finance team to now ring fence and do all the work associated with that. So the cost won't go down, I don't believe.
Thanks.
Unless you're looking to reduce some levels of service, which it may go down then.
Which we could do any day.
We could do any time.
I think from memory, David, the increase in costs were going to be between 800 and $1 million a year for standalone plus, because it is not just the Three Waters team that we would need to enhance. There's policy, lots of other parts of the business that would be impacted by the legislative changes.
Thank you.
So is that, for clarity, is that you're saying for standalone it's, say, 0.9 of a million, roughly, and for W plus A it's 1.7?
Well, the number I'm talking
Additional
about is our annual increase in operating costs if we were to go on our own. Is that right, David? I'm remembering vaguely there was between 800 and $1 million extra a year it would cost Masterton to operate on our own.
Yep. But the stranded overheads wouldn't come into effect, so it would be an increase on top.
Yes, it would be an increase, but with your hard work, you know what, I'd love to marry these two things together, and we could be as one.
A hospital would be great without patients, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Okay, any further questions?
Your Worship, can I just point out a matter of clarification? In the report, I identified that in the legislation currently there's the discretion for the DIA to allow an extension on the water services delivery plans past September. We, this very morning, received a letter from the Minister Simon Watts that identified I do not intend to grant extensions to the deadline for submitting plans given the progress made so far. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that we would probably need to get everything wrapped up.
Thank you.
All right.
He also said, didn't he, about that if we needed an extension, he would appoint his, is it commissioner?
Crown facilitator.
Crown facilitator, yeah. Yep, Crown facilitator. Yeah.
Crown facilitator. And I suppose my question is, can anyone fill me in? I mean, he may be, certainly the letter, he's not necessarily a bad guy.
Not necessarily what?
A bad guy. He might be quite helpful to us.
The facilitator, rather than the minister.
It's not a baddie.
It's worth noting that a facilitator would be at our cost.
Yes.
Would be
At our
At
cost.
our cost.
a trifling cost, I would imagine. We're looking at hundreds of millions potentially over 10 or 20 years that our community could pay extra if, for instance, we standardise the pricing. So I suppose against a couple of $100 million over 20 years, if it cost us 20 grand, that would be fairly cheap, would it? Would that be insignificant in your language?
Well, I'm not going to answer that because I don't know. But I think the point of the letter, the point I'm trying to make is that the Minister is minded, rather than waiting and having to go past that September timeframe, that he's very keen to assist councils in being able to arrive at a point that they can make their submission by the September date.
Okay, any further questions?
No?
Right, no further questions. We'll move forward to the recommendations.
So do we deliberate first on the submission?
No, I think I'm going to probably put the motion.
Oh, okay. I just wondered if it's polite to deliberate first and then decide. I don't know. I'm asking.
Are you going to do them by one, or are you going to do them Because you have to do with 3, don't you?
We can do the 5. We have to do an or and the 3. I'm
Put one or the other.
Pardon?
Put one or the other, so put either and have a discussion
Have the discussion.
around the first one.
So you're saying to have put
So-
all?
So 1, 2, 3.
So 3A or 3B and
Yeah.
have the discussion around either 3A or 3B.
So put the motion forward.
Put the motion for 3A
Or 3.
Yeah, that's what I was
or
going to
3B.
That's what I was going to
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. So what I will move the recommendations, 1, 2, with 3 being 3A, 4 and 5. Somebody prepared to move second that? So that I'm moving in 3 that we agree to progress work on the Wairarapa Taurua water service delivery model, including entering into a commitment agreement with the participating councils, developing the water services delivery plan and foundation principles to be carried forward into the WSDP and foundation documents that will include non-standardisation of pricing and debt, share allocation and decision making. Got a move, seconder? Seconder, Councillor Bowyer. Thank you.
Should in note 4, should those 2 offerings be detailed?
They are detailed within the report.
Oh, okay.
Are they detailed enough for you?
Well, yeah, I suppose so. Yep.
I'd like to just, with moving that motion, make 2 or 3 points. First of all, I think we need to recognise that today isn't D-Day in this process. If we go down the Wairarapa Taurua joint entity path today, we're not necessarily binding ourselves to go the full distance. I think that's important. What we're saying that is that yes, we will move into negotiation with Carterton, South Wairarapa and Taurua to set up a joint entity, but that if the majority of this council are unhappy with how the negotiations pan out, then there remains the opportunity to go down another track. So I think we need to be very clear about that. I think one of the difficulties about today's debate, though, will be how deeply we go into the likes of the standardisation and the share allocation, because it would be politically naive of us to delve too deeply into things that we're going to be discussing with the other councils. I think we need to be mindful of that as well, that there's still a fair bit of work to do. I think too that in between the 2 options today, it's in my mind the Wairarapa Taurua proposal is the best way to go at this point. But I think that we need to look at both sides of the argument. We're concentrating a lot on the Wairarapa Taurua, but we need to look on the Masterton standalone as well and look at the advantages and disadvantages of a standalone. And I think it's important to note that one of the important arguments I'd make against a standalone is that it doesn't align with the purpose and intent of the new legislation, which is to achieve regional water services, and that it would open us to a whole lot of further legislative controls. I mean, the plain facts are that the government has told us they don't want councils doing what we're doing now. And Simon Watts in his letter to us today says as much. And the cost of any of these new legislative changes, of course, would sit solely with Masterton ratepayers. The other points that have been made that I look on quite as being important is that we would be competing with other water entities for skilled staff. Some of those who ourselves, we talk a lot about our water services are in really good shape because we've got a great water staff, great water team, and we have. We've got a great water team. But these people, when this legislation comes through, are going to be headhunted by councils all over the country. I can tell you that. The people we have here will be headhunted. And if that's the case, we'll be relying on external consultants a lot to do our work. That's just going to be a point. It's interesting to me in that argument too that when people talk about how well our water services are operating, yes they are, but isn't it worth mentioning that the very staff that we're praising are actually recommending that the Wairapatara option is the best option for us. I think that's telling us well. Our staff are telling us, our senior staff are telling us this is a better way to go. There's no doubt too that a smaller scale of a standalone would reduce buying power, which could lead to less competitive pricing, and that too is a big disadvantage. And of course, across all if we stay standalone, we've got to pay for our water along with infrastructure and parks and reserves and libraries. I mean, imagine if we had another weather event like Cyclone Gabrielle and we have to spend tens of millions sorting out our roading infrastructure. Under a standalone, a lot of that cost would fall on our own council. And that would certainly mean that other services like water would suffer as a consequence. If we were in a joint entity and water costs were separated from the others, we wouldn't have that burden to worry about. And that's huge because weather events are happening all the time. I mean, just the other day we had a cracker that could have turned. I think we've got to look at both sides here today. We're not just looking at all the problems you have with a Wairapatara. There is one hell of a lot of problems with standing alone as well. And it is my view that the safer, less risky option at this point is to go forward with the Wairapatara, but at the same time what I'm saying is that I'll be the first one who would pull out of it if I felt that Masterton ratepayers weren't getting a fair deal. And I think all of us around the table feel that way, that we want Masterton ratepayers to come out of this well. And that's why I think the report that we've got before us today is excellent, in that it sets out the things that we're worried about, and it also points out that we do have a couple of off-ramps if we need. And it's also the other thing I think which is worth mentioning, as Karen mentioned before, is that even if we go down Wairapatara and we move that forward today, our staff are still continuing to work on a Masterton only delivery model at the same time because of the tight timelines. I think that's right, Karen, and that work continues so that we're ready to go with that and meet the timelines that we need to at the end if we do pull out. So to me, we've got all bases covered, basically, if we do what the recommendations are. I don't see a problem with it. I think for those of you who really support the standalone, you still, as we work through this process, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to put your points. This is not the done deal today. So that's how I feel. Craig has seconded. Do you want to make any comments?
Just say a couple things. Just around the movement, the non-standardisation of pricing and debt, share allocation and decision making, they are my three concerns all along. Okay. I'm happy to support the YT option at this point. However, I'm like some of our submitters as well. My support comes with a but. We run the risk over the first 10 years of possibly subsidising other councils to the tune of around $100 million, and that's unacceptable to me. Central government wants us to lower the overall rates burden on our ratepayers. Paying for other councils' water infrastructure doesn't achieve that. Standardisation is a transfer of wealth from one district to another, and not of the Robin Hood type of transfer. Okay? But from our ratepayers who are struggling themselves in this current economic environment. Negotiations between all councils will be tough. However, we need to be looking to the future. This decision is not so much about the now, it's about the future and some things that are uncertain. And that comes with risk, but it also comes with reward. The reward of knowing we're making efforts to ensure our water is up to the standard that our children and our children's children deserve. So as indicated, those three things, I'm happy for Waitu to go forward, but it does come with terms and conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Right, Councillor Lennox.
I just have a few words, thank you. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the significant work that has gone into the local water done well proposal by our council staff, but also commitment in gaining understanding and knowledge of this monster by my fellow elected members. It continues to evolve literally day by day, as we received a letter from the Honourable Simon Watts this morning with further information, and I'm sure by the time this process concludes, we will all be expert subject matters on water service delivery. I support the recommendation in principle, as it aims to ensure a safe, reliable and financially sustainable water service for our community into the future 10, 20, 50 plus years from now. Yes, I'm a visionary and I do believe that local water done well does enable sustainability, resilience and generational gain. However, like many of our community, I have concerns that need careful consideration if we were to move forward with the recommendation. Firstly, the financial implications on our Masterton ratepayers. With the Council already planning significant investments agreed upon in our long-term plan, adding the costs associated with establishing a new water service model and its forecasted workings will place additional strain on our ratepayers. It's crucial that we have a clear understanding of how these changes will impact household budgets of our Masterton ratepayers and what measures will be in place to mitigate financial burdens. In plain, simple language as well. We need to make sure we're communicating that clearly and early on in the piece. We need to be 100% clear when we head into negotiations on what it is we want from Masterton, which I feel positive we will do. It needs to be financially viable for our ratepayers, our voice needs to remain strong, and we need to ensure we retain some local control and accountability. The other three councils need us to make Y+T work, and we can still do it alone. Secondly, while local water done well framework promotes local decision making, the creation of a multi-council control organisation raises questions about governance. We must ensure Masterton's voice is heard and that when we head into these negotiations that we maintain our autonomy and reflect the uniques of our community, which as we know, and we've discussed a lot around this table, our community is far more diverse than in many areas in our neighbouring councils. If we proceed with the recommendation today, it's important that we, as elected members, carry our community's concerns moving forward and ensure they are clearly represented at the table. Given that an off-ramp option still exists down the line, I would hope that the priorities we put forward are genuinely considered by the other councils. Our goal should help shape an entity that is fair, balanced and reflective of all communities, Masterton included.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lennox. Any further discussion?
Yep.
Councillor Nelson.
I came in today just thinking, I just listened to see what happened, and I was hoping that there'd be more information about our standalone option as well. But I'm not going to support the recommendation, and I'm going to declare my hand, as many might already know, and say I think that we should go standalone, which is an option down here in this recommendation. I think the certainty that it provides, all I heard in those recommendations and read in those recommendations were uncertainties, and I believe those uncertainties weren't around the legislation, they're about working with the other councils. Now, I don't have a speech prepared like these two, so I'm going to go just from my notes here. I think the costs of standardisation, or the standardisation, I think that's significant. I think it could happen. Everything I've read from the Commerce Commission is that it could happen. Our prices could be standardised. And I haven't heard an argument categorically saying otherwise. I don't want our ratepayers here, that I've been elected to represent, to be subsidising the ratepayers in South Wairarapa, or Masterton, or Tararua. I've asked many times for what the impact or what a project would look like if it was just Tararua South Wairarapa and Masterton. That's never been answered. And because that hasn't been answered, I believe that Masterton ratepayers will be doing the heavy lifting for those three councils. I think we are big enough to go on our own. We're half the size of the four combined. And I don't know about people taking our staff. Who knows what will happen? Maybe it will be appealing for some people to work in a single council entity. We don't know. We're just guessing that people will come and poach our staff. We hear a lot, and that was in the letter from Simon Watt this morning, that we're under time pressure. So let's stop going down the Wairarapa plus T option right now and just concentrate on Masterton standalone. Other councils are doing it. We know that the Manawatu District Council, similar structure to us, one big town, satellite towns. They had 500 submissions, we got 139, I'm not quite sure how that happened, and 98% of their submissions came in supporting standalone. There must be a reason for that. Sure, there'll be differences between the councils, but I'm sure in the Venn diagram of life, there's a hell of a lot of similarities between both of us. I just cannot handle someone from River Road subsidising the rates or the water costs of someone from one of our other Wairarapa or Tararua councils. I think we should stop it right now. We've got the opportunity to do it. We've been talking about this for months. I believe there's been a narrative, others may disagree, from our officers pushing the Y plus T option from the very, very beginning with that multi-criteria.
That's unfair. That is unfair.
No, I'm saying what I believe. This is what I believe.
It is unfair.
This is what can I please? This is what.
Would you listen to me? What you're
No,
saying
you
is
listen to me
that
because
our
I'm speaking
officers-
at the moment. Let me finish and then comment at the end.
Okay.
From the very beginning, from that multi-criteria analysis, I believe there's been a push for Y plus T. That's what I truly believe. I've heard it for months. There's never been any real push at all from officers, I believe, for a Masterton standalone option. I've never heard it. I've heard that we're working on it. I've heard that we're working on it behind the scenes, but I've never seen any real drive or push for it. I have seen, and this is a compliment, the fact that our water infrastructure seems to be strong. You've done things like address Coburn Street. Yep, fantastic. That had a significant impact on our community. And when I read the reports that Mayors prepares, I see again and again and again that things are solid. We can do things with increased investment. Maybe prioritising this, I think we can manage it. And last of all, I think one of the biggest advantages of going alone is if we look at things holistically, we look at water and other things, we see the bigger picture. If we're not looking at things holistically, if water's over there, being controlled by that CCO, we're not looking at it in the overall burden for our ratepayers. It's a holistic thing. All our ratepayers will care about is what they're paying in terms of dollars for what they're receiving right now. And I see a real risk for us as a council to think, yep, water's over there, rates are over here, we're not thinking about them as one holistic amount. That's my position. So I'm not going to support it. I would hope that others will see my perspective, but I think my hope's in vain.
Thank you, Councillor Gould, and I want to make the point very strongly from my point of view, and I know from 99% of the councillors around this table that we've been absolutely delighted with the way the staff have worked on this. I would hate you, staff, to take any inference that we feel that you've been biased or that you've done things out of order. I think you've presented everything as well as you possibly could. I think we've been very fortunate. We've been a hell of a lot better off than most other councils. And so, as I say, any inference that staff have played a part in trying to move us into one direction, I think is totally false. Robin, do you want to say something?
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. From what I've read here, on page 24 of our report, it says that the officers did commission Morrison Lowe, which is Dan, who is actually a qualified lawyer and has worked in the United Kingdom, Australia, and led the Morrison Lowe company in New South Wales the previous 4 years, has worked in New Zealand on the previous three waters legislations with about 75% of the councils in New Zealand. It also says in regards to a method of share allocation. These can be discussed. Provision that protects the shareholders, i.e. Masterton District Council, these can be discussed. And decision-making mechanisms, they can all be discussed. I believe what I've read and heard from the submitters last week is that there is concern about what Masterton ratepayers have to pay, and that's genuine. I actually believe that that needs to be the start of the conversations with the other councils. I would also say that there perhaps needs to be a part of the conversation, deliberations, call them what you will, negotiations, about potentially ring-fencing debt from other councils so that your ratepayers, our ratepayers, do not take up the whole swag. So as I understand, potentially with a Wairarapa Tararua model is up to 500%. I would be very concerned that if all four councils put in all their collective debt, that day one started at what I might see as over 350%. So I just think we need to just get on with the negotiations. This isn't the end of the road, and I do sincerely believe, rightly or wrongly, that other councils perceive that they actually need Masterton more than Masterton needs them, and that's not an arrogant place to be. That's actually the reality of the amount of connections, the amount of ratepayers, that what you bring to a conversation over a long period of a life term of water service delivery, what you can bring. What other councils will naturally be looking at is the 10 years in which they also have to contribute towards Masterton and its sewage treatment station. So there are ups and downs, but if you are considering as council officers to have Dan Oliphant being one of your team, I think ratepayers in Masterton could be assured that he knows exactly where the ratepayers, whether they support Wairarapa Tararua, whether they support Enhanced, or as we saw in the submissions, especially from a former worship, that perhaps only a Wairarapa model. These are for the negotiations. We just need to move on today to the next step, and I do believe that we have had legal advice, and we just need to proceed to the next step so that those conversations can be had. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Gorman?
Yep, there are many things to discuss, like the 75%, which in theory gives us great protection against ever, having standardisation imposed upon us. But I remember your words, Karen. There are no guarantees against standardisation, W plus T. The only relative control is through the standalone model. Now certainly the regulations might push us to spend more. Whoop-de-doo, it's actually probably overdue when you look at some of our water figures. But as you said, there are no guarantees. So my concern is we're going to have these talks. I'm just going to keep repeating your words, which I suspect are true, that there are no guarantees. So why would you go down that road if you know that there are no guarantees?
Thank you, Councillor Goodwin. Any further discussion? Councillor Helena, then Joe. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Believe it or not, but I haven't made up my mind yet. It's simply because I think there's information that I don't understand yet. And simply because I think there's information that's still to come. I can't support the motion because I believe we should get that information before we make the first crucial step of going down a particular pathway. And that's what we're doing. We agreed to this. We're taking the first step to go down a Y plus T pathway. And we're doing it without, we're never going to get the full information because it's a very uncertain beast. And things will evolve over time. But there's information that we can have now. For example, we haven't worked out what our bottom lines are. We should be working out our bottom lines before we decide a pathway. before we decide this first step in the pathway. So because we don't have sufficient information, in my view, I can't support the motion. The second thing is, Mr Mayor, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say today you're pretty much in favour of the Y+T model. If that's the case, I cannot support item number 4, where where the Mayor and the CE will represent further discussions.
No, I did not say that.
I think it needs to be someone that elected members are confident in, and I think we need to vote on who that person will be. And we must make sure it's not someone who has already decided.
I have certainly not decided that, and I made that
Well,
very
I'm
clear.
pleased to hear that, Mr Mayor, because it sounded like that.
I've got it written down here what I actually said, Tom.
Yeah, well, we can
Just
play
click
back, perhaps play back the video and let people interpret what you said.
Or read Masterton matters, not that I can.
So for me, if we're going to have someone representing us, I think we should do that democratically, and someone that meets all the requirements around being neutral. And if you are very neutral, Mr Mayor, I apologise, but that was the way I interpreted it. Just picking up the point around a significant weather event, and that would be good for council because a water entity would have all the responsibility for that, and council wouldn't. But yeah, that's probably true. If you're on the next council and there's a water event in the next council, and there's a separate water entity responsible for all the infrastructure costs, yep, this council, we don't need to worry about it. One big thing off our mind, but our ratepayers need to worry about it because they're paying rates here and they're paying rates here. And so we've got to make sure we're getting this decision right, and it's in the very best interest of our ratepayers. So I can't buy into that argument, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so given that this process has sort of been flipped on its end from what I understood to be where we were going, I can't support it, but I can truly say I haven't decided which way I'm going, and I need more information before we can do that, and so I'm very reluctant to take this first step in going down one path.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I want to thank everybody for their contributions today. I think they've been very interesting. However, after sitting through all the discussions and that we've had around this kaupapa, we still stay firm in being able to support the staff to move through to having a discussion with the other councils. I think it's the right thing to do. I think staff have done an amazing job getting all the information that you have asked of them. There could be more, but we don't know what we don't know. And that's what this whole discussion is boiled down to. There are people in the room that want information that we don't know what the answers are. Only sitting at a table, going through negotiation, we may find some of those answers. Like Craig and his kōrero around cost efficiency, the future. I stand here about the future. This is all about the future. This is not the here and now. And we must think about what's in it for our mokopuna into the future. I've heard what Robin said around having Dan here. He's an amazing lawyer. He's given you some really good information, and we've been very fortunate to be able to have staff that can pick all that stuff up, have all those connections, and bring it here and put it in front of you. What's going to happen in those negotiations, I don't know. But all of those risks, nothing will happen unless you all input into it. If you choose to do nothing, as soon as they put it on the table, then that's on you as the council. If you choose to go, no, I'm not going to do anything, I don't like it, then that's your problem. And you carry that for the rest of your term. So all I say is that if I were able to vote, I would say go ahead with the negotiations. Go bring back all the good stuff that we want to have a look at. Bring back the risks that we face as council. Bring it all back and lay it on the table so we can actually add to the puzzle that people have actually identified here to our kōrero so we make a really good, solid decision into the future, whichever way it goes. You know where we sit on this, but But I'm just saying, this is yours to make that decision and make a good one. Kia ora.
Councillor, is it Councillor Holmes, was it? Were you going to?
No,
I'm out of this.
You can go first, Julian.
Thank you. Yeah, I know she does.
Thank you. Look, I just can't reiterate, and I congratulate the speakers for what they've said. It's a hell of a big project, this. It's not a project, I don't know what you'd call it, it's huge. And it's intergenerational too, because the next generation will be paying for it. But I'd just like to compliment the staff, because I think the staff have done a wonderful job. And Dan has been really good. I think we can get through this with our elected members, the people who are elected to do this negotiation, and it's not going to be easy. There won't be many harder deals you do than this one, and I'm sure that we can work on standardisation and the ring fencing. If things don't go well, we can get out of it eventually. But the depth ring fenced, and I think the off ramp is perfect. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Teddy.
Kia ora. I too would like to thank everyone for their contributions today, and also in the long journey that we've taken on this COPA. And I'm confused, still confused, because there's so many unanswered questions. The answers are there, but you have to decide on them. And but we're in this position to make a decision. And so I support the Y Plus team going ahead. And the reason why I support it is everything that's been said. I've listened to all the submissions, I've read them, I've read every report that we've had, I've been to all the pop-up sessions, I even created one of my own and got the workers, officers to come and talk. And it's a big decision, but I will support you going ahead with it. And why I do that is because, yes, you're right, Colombo, Coburn and Herbert Street problem, although it wasn't strictly drinking water, it was wastewater and stormwater, I believe. But the way those people were treated was disgusting, in my view. Some of the stories that I heard, made me cry. And I hope that we never treat our people like that again. And then we got a new set of officers and a new person to lead us through, and he found a solution for us, or they found a solution. So I think you're right when you say that people didn't want councils to be involved. They thought it should go to an outside group. Maybe it doesn't need to, but we can't be sure how long those people will be with us. They might decide to go tomorrow. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I am my whakapapa, and my whakapapa is me. 20% of the people, about 20%, that voted for me, they've said what, support iwi. And with that, I've spent 48 years living out of Masterton. But this was home, I always knew I was coming back to Masterton. But I was brought up in Carterton and Greytown, and now I live in Masterton. So it's a wadada for me. It's and having this water storage thing may mean that there'll be amalgamation. And to me that's quite important. I've always said that I believe in that we should have amalgamation, but it might not be next year if we go with a Masterton only model or enhanced model. It might be a few years off. we're not going anywhere. There's lawyers behind for Ngāti Kahunguri, so we'll be here for generations to come. So it doesn't happen in my time. Hope it will happen and so. The third thing, it has influenced my decision to support this going forward, is that my work with Robin in the Ngāti Kahunguri negotiating team, settlement team, I know that it's not the council, but today we heard at the combined council that the aspirations and dreams that our hapu and people want, and making it happen. And we helped to create that, and so amalgamation would further help that if we were a unitary authority. So that's what I want to say about it. Also, the reason why this is just an aside, why I said my point about supporting Stella with the negotiating team was when we negotiated our settlement, we had a plumber, a fencer, a social worker, a primary school teacher, a principal, a shearer, and we got 170 million. That was, so I think if you have someone who has got skin in the game, who are there for their people, they can do wonderful things too, and maybe get back things like standardisation, ring fencing, harmonisation. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I see the objective of local water done well is to strengthen our region's water resilience. The benefits for Y&T I see are economies of scale, operational efficiencies, reducing overheads, shared establishment and operational costs, procurement power with contractors, continuous work streams, attracting staff expertise and talent, and also retention of staff, increased borrowing capacity if required, of course, because we have bandied a figure about for Homebush, but the closer we get to that, more we'll know, and also iwi boundary alignment. The initial priority is getting around the table. We need to negotiate terms that protect Masterton ratepayers. The shared concern from submissions and from all of us around the table, whether for or against either model, is that Masterton does not want to subsidise other councils. So the conditions, I believe, need to be non-standardised pricing. Masterton has the highest value of assets and the largest number of connections. We come from a position of strength, as Robin said, the lowest debt to asset ratio, the lowest current connection pricing, the poorest community, and DIA confirmed that pricing should reflect the direct costs of services to each community. So I was reassured by that. I agree, non-standardised pricing is imperative. It's kind of non-negotiable. Secondly, our shareholding percentage, which Craig brought up as well. We need to know what our shareholding percentage is so that Masterton cannot be outvoted. Not to say that Masterton will be the bully boy, but we need to have reassurance that if we collaborate with other councils, that we have our fair say. We are elected to work in the best interests of our Masterton ratepayers, so that's what we need to do around the table. And the third thing is debt should be ring-fenced. The additional borrowing headroom should be structured for debt to reflect the borrowing requirements of each community. We're not here to pay for other people's work, and they're not here to pay for ours. So, to my mind, the foundation principles need to reflect this. Non-standardised pricing, shareholding percentage, and ring fencing. And finally, the terms of agreement should require 75% of the shareholders to agree before a significant foundation principle, such as non-standardised pricing, can be changed. And if these terms of agreements can't be agreed upon, then Masterton should leave the table and stand alone. I'm encouraged by all the information that we've received, especially of late reassurances about some of these principles that could be applied. So I'm looking forward to getting around the table, or our negotiators who get around the table, and having these discussions with our neighbouring councillors. So I support the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, I'm going to now put the recommendation. The recommendation being that we, 1, 2, 3 being 3A, 4, 5. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Do you want your votes for
Yep.
you three?
Yep. Division.
Division? Okay. Division being Councillor Holmes, Councillor Lennox, Councillor... No, I'm just saying who voted for it, just checking on that. Councillor Holmes, Councillor Lennox, Councillor Bay and myself, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Tuta. Against were Councillor Nelson, Councillor Helena and Councillor Good. Okay? The motion is passed. Thank you so much. That's the end of the meeting, and we'll now have a closing karaoke.
Can we put that chance for a question, Mr. Mayor?
Is it to do with us?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, the meeting is closed. We have a closing karaoke.
Kia mitura o te mahi o te roa.